The crystalline spires of Prime caught the light of three suns, casting rainbow shadows across the vast chamber where 200 species gathered to decide the fate of worlds. Ambassador Wei stood in the center of the circular floor, her simple gray suit a stark contrast to the elaborate garments, chitin armor, and bioluminescent displays of the beings surrounding her. Above her, arranged in ascending tiers that seemed to reach toward the vaulted ceiling, the representatives of the Galactic Council waited. She had been standing there for nearly an hour while they discussed humanity's application for membership. They discussed it as if she weren't there, as if the translator implant in her ear didn't let her understand every word of their debate. 40 standard cycles, Ambassador of the Empire said, his four arms spread wide in a gesture of disbelief. His scales shimmered deep purple, a color had learned meant contempt. They have been traveling between stars for less time than it takes our children to reach maturity, and they dare to request a seat among us. Laughter rippled through the chamber. It came in many forms, clicking mandibles from the harmonic chimes from the crystalline, guttural barks from species hadn't yet learned to identify. But the meaning was universal. They found humanity's request amusing. Continued, his voice carrying easily in the perfect acoustics of the chamber. Let us examine their credentials. They control 4 worlds, 4. The Empire alone governs 3,000 systems. They possess no graviton shielding. Their fastest vessels cannot exceed .7. They still use fusion reactors for power generation. He paused, letting that sink in. Fusion, like children playing with fire sticks. More laughter. Kept her face neutral, her hands clasped behind her back. She had been warned this would happen. Earth's diplomats had studied every species in the Council, learned their customs, their prejudices, their pride. They had not fought a war in 3,000 years because no one dared challenge them. They had enforced the Council's peace for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be threatened. Show them the ships, someone called from the upper tiers. Thought it might have been one of a species that resembled 6-legged wolves with too many eyes. Gestured and a hologram materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed a human dreadnought, the UES Indomitable, rotating slowly for all to see. The ship was massive by Earth standards, 2 kilometers long, bristling with missile batteries, armored with layered composite steel. Felt a brief surge of pride looking at it. Humanity had built that ship, had poured decades of research and resources into creating it. The Council looked at it, the way adults might look at a child's drawing of a house. This, said, his voice dripping with amusement, is their largest warship. They call it a dreadnought, a dreadnought. One of our patrol frigates carries more firepower. It possesses no energy shields, no quantum displacement drives, no reality-anchored weaponry. It fires projectiles, metal slugs accelerated by electromagnetic force. He paused for effect. They throw rocks at their enemies. The laughter was louder now, less restrained. Saw some representatives actually slapping their appendages together in mirth. The rang like bells, their crystalline bodies vibrating with what passed for laughter among their kind. Primitive, someone shouted. Adorable, another voice added. Let them join, a third voice called out. They will make amusing pets. Waited. She had learned patience in her 20 years as a diplomat, had learned that sometimes the best response was silence. She watched the way he preened under the attention, the way his scales shifted to a brighter purple as he basked in the Council's approval of his mockery. Finally, the laughter died down, turned to her, his large eyes glittering with something that might have been pity. Ambassador Way of Terra, the Council has heard your application. We find your species earnest, young, eager to learn from those greater than yourselves. In recognition of this eagerness and in the spirit of fostering growth among primitive species, the Council is prepared to grant you provisional membership. Inclined her head slightly. The people of Earth are grateful for this opportunity. There are conditions, of course, continued. A probationary period of 5 standard years. During this time, you will observe Council protocols, contribute to mutual defense as requested, and demonstrate that your species is capable of existing peacefully among civilized worlds. Do you accept these terms?" "We do." "Then it is done," made a complex gesture with all four arms. "Welcome to the Galactic Council, humanity. Try not to embarrass yourselves." More laughter followed as she left the chamber. She walked through corridors of living crystal, past species that had mastered technologies humanity barely understood, and felt the weight of their dismissal like a physical thing. They thought humanity was primitive, weak, harmless. She thought about the 3 ships currently docked at the station, the only military vessels Earth had sent to represent their entire civilization. She thought about what waited back home, in the Sol system, projects that had consumed decades and resources, preparations that humanity had made not because they were paranoid, but because they remembered their history. Humanity had spent 10,000 years learning one fundamental truth: hope for peace, but prepare for war. The Council had forgotten that lesson in there of unchallenged dominance. Reached her quarters and immediately opened a secure channel to Earth. The lag was only a few seconds, one advantage of the Council's communication technology that they had been willing to share. "They accepted the application," she said when the connection stabilized. "Just as we predicted, with mockery and contempt. They think we're children playing at being spacefaring." Admiral's face filled the screen, her dark eyes serious. "Good. Let them think that. How long do we have before they discover what we really are?" "Maybe 5 years, maybe less if something forces the issue." Paused. "Sarah, they laughed at the indomitable, called it primitive, called us primitive." "We are primitive by their standards," said calmly. "We don't have energy shields or quantum drives or reality anchors. What we have is 3,000 years of recorded warfare, 10,000 years of killing each other with increasingly efficient methods, and the collective knowledge of a species that has survived everything from ice ages to nuclear weapons. They've had peace for so long they've forgotten what war really means. I hope we never have to show them." "So do I, but if we do," smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Well, they're about to learn why we named our dreadnought Indomitable instead of Invincible. Get some rest, Ambassador. You've earned it." The channel closed. Sat in the darkness of her quarters, looking out at the stars beyond the crystal walls. Somewhere out there, 3 human ships waited at the edge of Council space, accepted but dismissed, tolerated but not respected. That was fine. Humanity had been underestimated before. 3 months later, the galaxy learned what real fear felt like. The swarm came from beyond the galactic rim, a tide of organic ships that moved like a living thing because they were living things. Grown and bred for war, guided by a collective intelligence that had consumed 1,000 worlds before turning its hungry gaze toward Council space. The first attacks hit border colonies. Himself led the response fleet, confident that the superior technology of the Empire would crush these upstart invaders as it had crushed every threat for 3. His ships engaged the vanguard with energy weapons that could crack planets, with quantum missiles that existed in multiple realities simultaneously, with gravity wells that could tear apart asteroids. They kept coming. They absorbed energy. They adapted to quantum frequencies. They moved through gravity wells as if they weren't there. And when they closed with vessels, they tore them apart with claws made of compressed matter and acid that could eat through military-grade armor in seconds. Retreated after losing 1/3 of his fleet. The followed. More colonies fell. More ships died. The reports came flooding into the Council chambers, millions dead, entire systems evacuated, refugees fleeing ahead of the advancing swarm. Emergency sessions were called. Species that hadn't mobilized their militaries in centuries scrambled to reactivate old ships, to remember old tactics. The Council issued conscription orders to every member species, including the members. Ambassador received the order in her quarters on Prime. She read it carefully, then transmitted it back to Earth along with her own analysis. The message was simple: contribute 3 capital ships and support vessels to the defense fleet assembling its gate. Earth's response came 12 hours later. It was equally simple: acknowledged and smiled as she read it. The Council wanted 3 ships. They would get 3 ships. After all, that was what humanity had shown them. That was all they thought humanity possessed. The Council didn't know about the other 2,997 warships waiting in the Sol system. They didn't know about the decades humanity had spent preparing for exactly this kind of threat. The resources poured into converting every rock in the asteroid belt into a potential weapon. The defense grids hidden on moons and planets throughout the system. The Council had mocked the Terran storm. They had laughed at humanity's primitive technology and simple weapons. They had dismissed the species that still threw rocks at their enemies. They were about to learn that sometimes the oldest weapons were the most effective, and that a species which had spent its entire history perfecting the art of killing its own kind might just be very, very good at killing other things too. The storm was coming, and the galaxy wasn't ready for it. The staging area at its gate had been designed to accommodate 1,000 ships comfortably. 20,000 vessels crowded into the space now, a desperate assembly of every military craft the Council could muster. Species that had been rivals for centuries worked side by side, united by the threat of extinction. The swarm had already consumed 15 systems, and their numbers seemed endless. Commander of the stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical display with growing despair. His scales had turned a dull gray, the color of mourning among his people. He had lost his entire command twice over in the past month, watching ships crewed by friends and family dissolve under bioacid or get torn apart by their claws. The empire that had dominated the galaxy for 3,000 years was bleeding, and he didn't know how to stop it. A notification chimed. Commander, the Terran contribution has arrived. Pulled up the visual feed, curious despite himself. Humanity was still an unknown quantity. They claimed to have military experience, but 40 years of spacefaring hardly compared to civilizations that had been traveling the stars for. Still, every ship counted now, every weapon that could be brought to bear against the swarm. What he saw made his scales flash orange with anger. 3 ships, 3 boxy, ungainly vessels that looked more like cargo haulers than warships, accompanied by a handful of smaller craft that might have been patrol boats. This was humanity's contribution. This was what they sent to help save the galaxy. He opened a channel. Terran vessels, this is Commander of the Imperial Fleet. Identify yourselves. A woman's face appeared on his screen. She had dark skin, gray hair pulled back severely, and eyes that held no fear. Commander, I'm Admiral Sarah, commanding the United Earth ship Indomitable. With me are the UES Defiant and UES Resolute, along with support craft. We're here as requested by Council order. Those 3 ships are your entire contribution. Couldn't keep the contempt from his voice. The Council called for full military mobilization from every member species. And we've with the Council's request, said calmly. 3 capital ships and support vessels, as in the conscription order. Wanted to argue, wanted to demand more, but the order had indeed 3 capital ships. The Council had assumed member species would send more out of self-interest, but technically, humanity had fulfilled their obligation. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. You're assigned to rear guard duty, protect the supply lines, stay out of the way of real warships. If was offended, she didn't show it. Understood, we'll take position at the rear of the formation. The channel closed, turned back to his tactical display, dismissing the human contribution from his mind. 3 ships wouldn't make a difference anyway. The battle would be won or lost by proper military forces, by species that understood modern warfare. The Allied fleet moved toward the cluster, where long-range scouts had detected the main force. Intelligence suggested there were 50,000, maybe more, feeding on the remains of 3 conquered systems and preparing to push deeper into Council space. This would be the decisive battle. If the Council lost here, there would be no stopping the swarm. Positioned his forces according to standard doctrine. Heavy ships in the center, fast attack craft on the flanks, support vessels in the rear. The human ships took their assigned position at the very back, so far from the front lines they might as well have stayed its gate. They arrived like a dark cloud blotting out the stars. 50,000, each one a nightmare of evolved killing efficiency. They had no formation, no obvious tactics. They simply came in a wave, driven by the collective intelligence that guided them. The Council fleet opened fire at maximum range. Energy beams that could vaporize mountains splashed harmlessly against adaptive bioarmor. Quantum missiles phased into alternate realities and found the waiting for them there too. Gravity weapons that should have crushed the organic vessels were absorbed and redirected. They had learned. Every weapon the Council threw at them, they had encountered before and adapted to survive. They closed the distance impossibly fast, and then they were among the fleet, tearing ships apart with brutal efficiency. Watched his forces die, watched centuries-old warships crumble like paper, watched crews of thousands snuffed out in seconds. The flanks collapsed. The center line buckled. He gave the order he never thought he would have to give. All ships fighting retreat, fall back to the supply lines. The retreat was chaos. Ships fleeing in every direction, trying to break contact with the pursuing swarm. The followed, sensing victory, they're moving with predatory grace as they hunted down stragglers. Then something strange started happening. At the edge of the swarm simply stopped. They went dark and drifted, lifeless in the void. A dozen, then 100, then 1,000, stared at his tactical display in confusion. They didn't stop. They didn't retreat. They fought until they were destroyed or they won. "Commander, we're detecting mass impacts throughout the formation," his tactical officer reported. "Something is punching straight through their ships. No energy signature, no quantum wake, just impacts." "What kind of impacts?" "Unknown, sir." "Wait." The officer's scales flushed white with shock. "Sir, I'm picking up ballistic trajectories, thousands of them. Something has been firing projectiles at for the past several hours. They're just now reaching the target zone." Pulled up the trajectory data, traced the firing solutions backward, and felt his heart skip a beat. The trajectories originated from the rear of the formation, from where the human ships were positioned. He opened a channel. "Admiral, what have you done?" The human woman looked tired but satisfied. "Kinetic bombardment, Commander. We've been launching penetrators for the past 6 hours, ever since we detected the approach vector. Tungsten-jacketed osmium rounds, each weighing 5 tons, accelerated to 0.3 by hour. They're reaching the target zone now." Looked back at his tactical display. More were dying every second, huge cavities blown through their organic hulls. The impacts created superheated plasma that expanded faster than the biomatter could regenerate. And the projectiles kept coming, an endless rain of relativistic death. "You've been firing for 6 hours, couldn't comprehend it. How much ammunition do you carry?" "We brought enough," said simply. "Each of our ships has 4 primary and a manufacturing bay that can produce ammunition from raw materials. As long as we have power and mass, we can keep firing. And Commander, we brought a lot of mass. Those cargo haulers you dismissed, half their volume is raw materials for ammunition production." The formation was breaking apart now, gaps opening in their wall of ships. Saw the opportunity and seized it. All ships forward, push through the gaps, attack pattern Theta 7. The Council fleet surged forward, exploiting the holes the human kinetic weapons had created. Energy weapons and quantum missiles found unprotected and tore them apart. For the first time since the war began, they were the ones retreating. The battle raged for another 4 hours. The humans never stopped firing, never ran out of ammunition, never faltered. Their simple, primitive weapons proved devastatingly effective against an enemy that had adapted to counter every advanced technology the Council possessed. When they finally broke and fled, they left behind 30,000 dead. The Council had won. Barely. Slumped in his command chair, exhausted and grieving for the thousands of ships they had still lost. But they had won. Against all odds, they had stopped the swarm. His tactical officer spoke urgently. "Commander, the surviving are jumping to faster than light. We're tracking their destination." "Where are they going?" "Sol system, sir. They're heading for Earth." Felt his scales flash orange again, this time with alarm. They were smart. They had identified the key to their defeat and were moving to eliminate it. "How many ships do they have?" "Approximately 20,000, sir." Opened a channel to the Indomitable. Admiral was already on screen before he could speak. "We know," she said quietly. "We received the tactical data. The swarm is heading for Earth." "Admiral, I'm sorry. We'll pursue with everything we have, but they have a 3-hour head start. Even our fastest ships won't arrive in time to save us." The expression was unreadable. "Commander, you've made a lot of assumptions about humanity since we met. You assumed we were weak because our technology is simple. You assumed we were helpless because we only sent 3 ships. You assumed Earth was undefended because this is all you've seen of our military." She leaned forward, and her eyes were hard as diamond. "Those were dangerous assumptions. They are about to make the same mistake. They think they're attacking a lightly defended. What they're actually doing is walking into the most heavily fortified system in this galaxy." "What do you mean?" "I mean we named our first dreadnought Indomitable instead of Invincible for a reason, Commander. One word means you can't be defeated. The other means you refuse to be defeated. There's a difference." She paused. "You're about to see what 40 years of human paranoia and preparation looks like. I suggest you hurry. You won't want to miss this." The channel closed, stared at the screen, then looked at his tactical officer. "Maximum speed to Sol system. I want to see what the humans have been hiding." "Yes, sir." As his ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They had mocked humanity, dismissed them as primitive children playing at war. But the humans had a saying his translator implant had recently learned. "Never laugh at someone who warns you they're dangerous, especially if they smile when they do it." The swarm emerged from faster-than-light travel in the Sol system like a plague made manifest. 20,000, each one a testament to evolved killing efficiency. Their collective intelligence focused on a single goal: destroy the source of the weapons that had defeated them. They expected to find a primitive civilization, perhaps a few orbital platforms, maybe those crude warships with their kinetic weapons that had proven so effective. What they found was a nightmare that their understanding. The system was already at battle stations. Every planet, every moon, every significant asteroid was armed and tracking them. The swarm sensors detected thousands of energy signatures, tens of thousands of weapons, hundreds of thousands of potential threats. This wasn't a lightly defended. This was a fortress that had been decades in the making. On Earth, in a bunker 3 kilometers beneath the surface, Admiral stood in the command center and watched the tactical display. Around her, hundreds of officers coordinated the defense of humanity's home system, their voices calm and professional despite what was coming. "Swarm is spreading into attack formation," her tactical officer reported. "Estimated composition, 20,000 class 3 through 7. They're moving toward Earth and Mars on multiple vectors." "Good," said. "They're doing exactly what we predicted. General, are your forces ready?" On another screen, General, no relation to the ambassador, nodded from his command post on Luna. "All lunar defense batteries are hot, Admiral. We've got firing solutions on 3,000 targets and counting." "Mars station is green across the board," came the reply from Commander Jackson. Arrays fully charged. We're ready to introduce our guests to old-school ballistics. Jupiter. All moon batteries operational, reported Captain from Ganymede. The outer defense perimeter is yours to command, Admiral. Took a deep breath. This was what humanity had been preparing for since the moment they left Earth's atmosphere and realized they were not alone in the universe. Every space program, every military budget, every resource they could spare had gone into one goal: ensure that Earth would never be vulnerable to extinction again. Asteroid Command status. All rocks are moving, Admiral, came the cheerful reply from Commander Reeves, speaking from a control center built into Ceres itself. We've got 1,700 asteroids ranging from 10 meters to 5 kilometers in diameter, all equipped with guidance systems and fusion drives. They'll reach attack velocity in 30 minutes. 1,700 asteroids, each one a weapon that had been positioned over decades, waiting for this exact moment. The galaxy thought humanity threw rocks at its enemies. They had no idea how right they were, or how devastating those rocks could be. All ships execute defense pattern Delta, ordered. Let's show these things what a prepared defense looks like. The space around Earth lit up with weapons fire. 3,000 human warships, dreadnoughts, cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and support craft opened fire simultaneously. They formed a layered defense grid, each ship positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that would shred anything trying to reach the inner system. The charged into the maelstrom. They had adapted to energy weapons, had learned to counter quantum technology, had evolved defenses against every advanced weapon the Council possessed. But they had never encountered anything like this. Fired from every angle, not the massive ship-mounted weapons like those on the Indomitable, but thousands of smaller batteries that Earth had been building and emplacing for 40 years. Tungsten rounds moving at orbital velocities punched through hulls. The organic armor that could adapt to energy weapons meant nothing against solid matter moving at 50 kilometers per second. They tried to adapt, tried to evolve thicker armor, but adaptation took time and they didn't have time. The asteroid barrage arrived, and suddenly the swarm was facing not just ships and stations, but massive chunks of rock moving at velocities that turned them into civilization-ending weapons. A tried to destroy an incoming asteroid with its biocannons. The rock absorbed the damage, its surface flash vaporizing, but its massive bulk continuing forward. 10,000 tons of iron-nickel ore traveling at 80 kilometers per second hit the dead center. The impact created a flash of light visible from Earth's surface. When it faded, there was nothing left of either the asteroid or the except expanding clouds of plasma and debris. Multiply that by 1,700, and the formation began to disintegrate. They're trying to split up, the tactical officer reported. Some are heading for Mars, others toward Jupiter. They're spreading out to reduce casualties. Let them, said calmly. Mars, you have incoming, light them up. On Mars, weapons systems that had been hidden for decades revealed themselves. The red planet had been thoroughly militarized, its surface dotted with disguised bunkers and its orbit filled with defense platforms. When they arrived, they found a reception committee of 500 ships and 200 orbital weapons platforms. Commander Jackson's voice was almost gleeful. Target-rich environment, all batteries free fire, make them regret coming here. The space around Mars became a killing field. They had numbers, but numbers meant nothing when every angle of attack was covered, when every approach was met with overwhelming firepower. Died by the hundreds. The group that headed for Jupiter fared no better. The gas giant's moons had been converted into weapons platforms, each one hosting arrays that could track and fire on dozens of targets simultaneously. They flew into a crossfire from 16 different moons, each shot calculated to intercept their flight paths. Admiral, the swarm is breaking up completely, her tactical officer said. They're scattering, trying to find weak points in our defense. They won't find any. Every approach to Earth is covered. Every vector is guarded. We've had 40 years to prepare this defense, and we've used every single day. Pulled up the casualty reports. Human losses were mounting. 3,000 dead so far, ships destroyed, stations damaged. Each number represented people she had trained with, served with, commanded. The cost of victory was always paid in blood. But they were dying faster. For every human ship lost, 10 were destroyed. For every weapons platform silenced, 50 enemy vessels were torn apart by the relentless kinetic barrage. The battle lasted 7 hours. It wasn't a fight, it was an extermination. They had expected to overwhelm a primitive civilization with superior numbers and evolved biotechnology. Instead, they found themselves in a meat grinder, fighting against an enemy that had turned its entire home system into one massive weapon. When the last was destroyed, finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion. She slumped in her command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed the debris field where they had been. 20,000 reduced to nothing. Humanity had won, but the cost made her chest ache. Admiral incoming faster-than-light signatures, the tactical officer reported. Multiple vessels, it's the Council fleet, Admiral, they're here. The screen showed Commander's flagship dropping out of FTL, followed by what remained of the Allied fleet. They had come expecting to find Earth burning, its civilization shattered. Instead, they found human salvage crews already at work, harvesting the corpses for materials and technology. Opened a channel. Commander's face appeared, his scales a color she had never seen before, something between white and gold that her database suggested was profound shock. Admiral, he said slowly, what did we just see? You saw Earth's defense fleet, Commander. All 3,997 warships, plus our fixed defenses and our asteroid bombardment system. Did you think those 3 ships we sent to Gate were our entire military? You deceived us. You let us think you were weak. We let you think what you wanted to think, corrected. You saw 3 ships and assumed that was everything. You never asked if we had more. You never considered that a species might keep the bulk of its military at home, protecting what matters most. You mocked us for being primitive, for using kinetic weapons, for throwing rocks. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. Turns out rocks are pretty effective when you throw them hard enough. Was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I need to come aboard your ship. We need to talk. Docking port 7, come alone. 30 minutes later, Commander stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring out at Earth through the massive viewports. The planet was beautiful, blue and green and white, unmarked by the battle that had raged around it. His scales kept shifting colors as his emotions warred within him. Shame, respect, fear, wonder. Why hide this capability? He asked quietly. Why let us mock you, dismiss you, treat you like children? Stood beside him, also looking at Earth. Because we wanted to join the Council to learn, not to intimidate. Because we hoped we would never need to show you this side of humanity. Because peace is always preferable to war, and we didn't want to be known as the species that solved every problem with violence. But you prepared for violence anyway. We prepared for survival. There's a difference. She gestured at Earth. That planet down there has been through 5 mass extinctions. It survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, and countless other disasters. The species that evolved there learned one fundamental lesson: hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We came to the stars carrying that lesson with us. You let us laugh at you. We did, and that was your choice, Commander. You saw our technology and called it primitive. You saw our weapons and mocked them. You looked at 3 ships and assumed you knew everything about us. Turned to face him directly. You forgot that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. You forgot that a species doesn't need quantum weapons and reality anchors to be dangerous. You forgot that humanity spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing, and that all that experience doesn't just disappear because we stopped fighting each other and started reaching for the stars. Scales flashed blue, acknowledgement of truth among his people. What happens now? Now moved to her command chair and sat down, suddenly looking every one of her 60 years. Now we grieve for the 3,000 people we lost today defending our home. Now we help the council finish cleaning up now we try to build the peaceful future we joined the council to find. She paused. And now you go back to the council and tell them that humanity is not primitive, not weak, not helpless. We're different, yes. Our technology looks simple compared to yours. But different doesn't mean inferior. They won't laugh at you again. They shouldn't have laughed at us in the first place, Commander. But if this is what it took to earn respect, then so be it. Stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. We're allies now, Commander. We fought together at Cluster and we'll fight together again if we must. But I hope we won't have to. Looked at her hand, understanding the gesture from his cultural briefings. He reached out with one of his 4 arms and clasped it. I hope so too, Admiral. I hope so too. 6 months later, Ambassador Wei stood once again in the council chambers on Prime. This time, no one was laughing. The representatives watched in respectful silence as the council's leader spoke. Humanity's probationary period is hereby ended. You have proven yourselves worthy of full membership in this council, not just through your courage in battle, but through your restraint in peace. You could have demanded concessions after your defense of Earth. You could have leveraged your military strength for political gain. Instead, you continued to work as equals to share your knowledge to help rebuild what was lost. The leader paused, then continued. The Council also recognizes that our initial assessment of humanity was flawed. We allowed our pride to blind us to your true capabilities. This was our failing, not yours. In recognition of this, and in recognition of your military expertise, the Terran Defense Fleet is hereby granted co-command of Council military operations, alongside the Empire. Bowed her head. The people of Earth are honored by this trust. We came to you seeking friendship and knowledge. We wanted to be part of something greater than ourselves. We still want that. But we also want you to understand something important about humanity. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or optical sensors or psionic fields of every representative present. We remember. We remember every slight, every mockery, every dismissal, not with anger but with motivation. You laughed at the Terran storm. You called us primitive. You mocked our technology and our ships and our weapons. Briefly. The silence in the chamber was absolute. We don't hold grudges, continued. But we do learn from our experiences. You taught us that the galaxy judges by appearance, not substance. That advanced technology doesn't always mean effective technology. That sometimes the oldest weapons are the best weapons. These are valuable lessons, and we thank you for them. She smiled, and there was steel beneath it. We suggest you don't make the mistake of laughing at us again, not because we'll retaliate, but because we'll prove you wrong. Again, and again, and again. That's what humanity does. We survive, we adapt, and we overcome. It's what we've always done. It's what we'll always do. In the back of the chamber, Commander did something unprecedented for a military commander. He bowed his head in respect to the human representative, his scales shifting to gold, the color of highest honor among his people. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was primitive, yes. Young, yes. Simple in their technology and direct in their methods, yes. But they were also survivors, warriors, and innovators who had spent their entire history turning disadvantages into weapons. They were a species that had climbed from caves to stars in a